Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to share our recent research result. And this is joint work with my advisor, Elaine. So today I'm going to talk about a transaction fee mechanism for blockchain. So today I will give you two results. So first, I will break your hope by giving the impossibility result. And finally, I will give you a hope by giving a positive result. So to begin with, let me start with what is the transaction fee mechanism? So on blockchain, there are two kinds of players. Miner maintains the blockchain, and user has the transaction. They want to send money to each other. So miner's job is to pick up user's transaction into the block. And user pays the transaction fee to the miner as the reward. So the fee mechanism is going to decide which user are confirmed and how much should they pay. However, when the number of users is larger than the size of the block, then the user need to compete with each other. And it works like an auction. So it's like we have a lot of buyers, they want to buy a few items. So in today's today's talk, you can think of the fee mechanism as an auction, where the miner is the auctioneer and the user is like the buyers in the auction. And for example, different blockchain use a different mechanism. For example, the Bitcoin use the pay your bit mechanism, and Ethereum use the EIP 1559 mechanism, which is just deployed this year. So before talking about our result, let's check what is the problem in the current mechanism. So the Bitcoin use the pay your bit mechanism works as follows. So the miner just picked, so K is the block size. The miner just picked the highest K bits into the block, and all of them are confirmed. And each user just pays its bit, and all the payment goes to the miner. So what is the problem of this mechanism? This mechanism encourages user to bid untruthfully. And this is actually happens in reality. So in practice, the user usually use this fee estimator to estimate the bids. So this fee estimator monitor the market and try to guess what is the bare minimum that a transaction can be confirmed. And from aspect of user experience, this is really bad because the user need to monitor the environment. So can we solve this problem? Actually, we can. So in the traditional mechanism design, there is a mechanism called second price auction. And it works as follows. So again, K is the block size. So in this case, only the top K-1 users are confirmed. The lowest price is not confirmed. And all the confirmed users only need to pay the Kth bit, which is the lowest price. So for example, if the block size is 5, the top 4 are confirmed, and all of them just need to pay $3. But what is the problem of this mechanism? Second price auction is easily manipulated by the miners. So, for example, because the payment is decided by the lowest price, so the miner can just inject a fake transaction by itself. So for example, miner just inject the transaction 5. And in this case, all the user paid more. And in addition, miner can also collude with the final users. So it asks the user, oh, not to pay 3, not to bid 3, you can bid 5. And we can split the profit of table. So this is the drawback of second price auction. Okay, so far, okay, any question? Feel free to interrupt me anytime. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's our objective? Like, what are we trying to do?
Oh, yeah. So this is actually the next slide.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So from the discussion above, we can conclude 3 desired property that we want. Yeah.
So why did we choose the top K minus 1 users instead of the top K? Do I create a bad incentive if I let the K bidder also pay their price and get the transaction?
Oh, okay. So maybe I can answer your question 2 minutes later, because when I introduce these desired properties, then I can answer your question. So a really brief explain is that if I just choose top K minus 1, then second price auction actually the best strategy for the user is always bid truthfully. But if all the users are confirmed, then it is not this case. The user has incentive to bid strategically.
It's a similar but different question. Why are we not filling up the block? If the block has K slots, why do we have K minus 1 K instead of K plus 1?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Why don't we confirm K user and use the K plus first? As the
K plus first.
Like you can use the K plus first bid as a price and confirm the top K.
The point is the blockchain needs to know the price, and it cannot be anything outside of blockchain.
I see.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any question? Yeah. So it will be clear after I introduce what is our designing goals. So from the discussion above, we can conclude 3 desired properties that we want. So the first one is called UIC. So that means if you are a user, the best strategy for you is just to always bid truthfully. So in this case, if you are a user, you don't need to care about what environment is. You don't need to care about what other people do. And the second property is called MIC. So that means if you are a miner, the best strategy for you is just to follow the mechanism. You don't want to like inject transactions or deviating from the protocol. And the third property we want is called side contract proofness. That means even the miner and several users, they form a coalition. They cannot get any benefit by deviating from the protocol. And here we have a parameter called C, so that constraint that the miner can only collude with at most C users. In this case, we call it CSCP. And throughout the talk today, we will focus on these 3 properties. Does it make sense? Yeah. And actually, it's really interesting that the second price and the first price auctions are like the golden design in the traditional mechanism design, but they actually fail to satisfy all 3 properties. Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, if we define the second price auction like we only confirm the top K minus 1, then the second price auction actually satisfies UIC. But as we have seen, the second price auction can be manipulated by the miner, so it is not MIC. And the miner can also collude with the user of the lowest price, so it is not one SCP. And actually, not only the first price and the second price auctions, there are several works try to design a better fee mechanism for blockchain. But so far, all the existing work failed to satisfy all 3 properties.
How should we think of the CPU? Like, should should we think of a C equals 3 is already interesting, or C should be larger?
Yeah, good question. So 1 SCP is the weakest. And so far, there is no mechanism that can satisfy all three properly. And I mean, even 1 SCP. So even 1 SCP is interesting. Yeah. Questions? Okay, so given this situation, so when Tim Rock Gardens analyzed fee mechanism, he raised the following question. Can we have a dream mechanism that satisfies all three properties? So this is the big question. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I have a question again about, so is there an objective function? Because isn't a possible dream mechanism because everyone does nothing and there's no objective and all of those things would be satisfied. So I'm just asking, like, is there an objective such that none of, there's
Everyone.
properly conducted access,
I guess right now the question is there anything non-trivial? What's the fact that trivial mechanism?
Yeah.
Nothing that's confirmed that no one can.
Yeah.
So right now, like even without any objective, is there anything non-trivial? We don't know anything.
Oh, I see. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any question?
I guess this is sort of a big picture question, but like, how should I think of this situation as influenced by like the constraints of the blockchain? Like right now, it just feels like an auction to me.
Yeah, so we will talk about later what is the difference between like the design for blockchain or design for the traditional auctions. Yeah, so I can make a quick remark is that, so in a traditional auction, usually we consider auctioneer as an honest player, we just trust it. But in the blockchain setting, usually miner is not trusted. So in this case, MIC and SCP is like the new design code for blockchain. And later on, I will formally define what is the formal model of transaction fee mechanism. And we will see that on blockchain, we actually have some new design tools like the burning. And we'll talk about it later. Yeah. So there are actually some difference between the traditional mechanism design and the blockchain design. Yeah.
We have can you describe any option that this has the first data saving? Because I don't see that the first and second price option is that USA and
You mean the first price auction is UIC and
I'm just asking for anything that this has the first.
has first two.
Most the price option is like finite lot size.
Oh, right.
Most the price option is finite lot size. If you bid at least that you are eligible to be confirmed, but the miner can only bid up to the block size amount. Let's say the miner is the highest. What's the finite block size posted price one?
So posted, yeah. So let me define. I guess either infinite or finite should satisfy UIC and Meyerman.
No, but infinite satisfies SCP.
Right.
I think the finite
depends on what the miner revenue is.
So, miner takes miner takes off.
Yeah, it is not SCP.
Okay, maybe that's a better.
Yeah. Okay. So
if I just wanted UIC and MIC, then you are saying this posted price of.
Yeah, price option where miner takes other payment, and assuming the block size is continued, satisfies UIC, MIC. It's not the one SE.
Yeah, so let me quickly define what is post-bid price auction. So post-bid price auction, there is a fixed price R. Everything higher than R is confirmed, and the confirmed user just pay R. It's something like we go to the supermarket, the price is over there, yeah, and you just need to pay that price. Yeah.
Sorry, one last question. So the MIC is like miners allowed to deviate. What exactly is the miner allowed to do? Like the example you gave was he's allowed to inject data bids. So with UIC, it's like very well defined. It's just bid. They say it's bid, and you don't want to deviate. MIC, I guess there could be like tons of weird actions that they do. So is there like a well defined set of things?
Yeah. Yeah. So later on, when I formally define the model, there is something called inclusion rules. So if you design a mechanism, inclusion rules specified what should the miner do. So with that, we just define MIC that the miner's best strategy is follow inclusion rule. Yeah. Any question? Okay. So our main question today is, can we have a dream mechanism that satisfies these three properties? So actually, so far, Ethereum's mechanism is the closest to what we want. Yeah. So let me quickly explain what does the Ethereum achieve. So if the number of user is smaller than the size of the block, which is called uncongested, then EIP 1559 just works as the post-bid price auction. So there is a fixed price called R. Everything higher than R is confirmed. And in this case, we are fine. And so today we are not going to the details of EIP 1559, but just a quick remark that in the uncongested case, miner actually gets nothing. All the payment is burned. I mean, by burning, I just means this money are totally eliminated from the circulation. So users pay something, pays R, but actually miner gets nothing. And later on, we'll talk about this design is actually necessary. Yeah. But for now, you can just think of, if the number of users is smaller than the size of block, then we are fine. All three properties satisfied. However, if the number of users is larger than the size of the block, which is called congested, then the mechanism reduced to first price auction, which is not UIC.
What incentive does the miner have to do anything?
Miner has to.
What incentive does the miner have to do anything if they don't get anything?
There's still a block reward, which is a constant, so the model is
Yeah. Any question?
Sorry, yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah. So again, let's go back to our main question. Can we have a dream mechanism that satisfies all three properties? So here's our result. Unfortunately, we show that if the block size is finite, there is no non-trivial mechanism that can satisfy UIC, MIC, and one SCP at the same time. And here, I mean by non-trivial means it is actually your question. We show that the only mechanism that satisfies these three properties is to reject anyone. Yeah. And we show that that is the only mechanism achieve this. But actually, that makes the blockchain useless. And another remark is that to echo your question is that one SCP is the coalition formed by one miner and one user, and that is the weakest coalition we can conceive. So our result shows that if you want UIC and MIC, you cannot even resist this weakest coalition. So this is our first result. And later on, we'll show that we'll give you a positive result by relaxing the incentive compatibility notions. So we'll talk about later. And finally, we'll show that if you want to design a mechanism that satisfies these properties, some elements, some designing components are necessary. And we'll talk about what is the necessary components. So here's our result. Any question? Okay, so in the following talk, I will first formally introduce what is the model of fee mechanism. And then I will talk about our proof for the impossibility result. And finally, I will give you a concrete mechanism that actually satisfies three properties in the relaxed model. Okay, so formally speaking, what is the fee mechanism? So fee mechanism has four components. And in the following, I will use the second price auction as an example to explain these four mechanisms. Yeah. So as we have seen, the second price auction is not an auction, awesome actions for blockchain. It is not MIC and it's not one SCP, but it's a good example to illustrate in this, these four components. Okay, so first, inclusion rule specifies what the miner should do. So transaction pool is the miner can see. Okay, so here's the market. There are a lot of users. They just announce their bids. So the inclusion rule tells the miner how do you choose the transaction from the transaction pool. So take the second price auction as an example. The inclusion rule is simple, just to pick the top K transaction into the block. So if, for example, if the block size is 3, the miner just need to pick up the highest 3 transactions into the block. So this inclusion rule is implemented by the miner. You are the designer, you tell the miner what to do, and the honest miner follows the inclusion rule. And of course, if a malicious miner, you can try to deviate from the inclusion rule, like injecting fake transaction.
What is the sort of justification in the model? Like, you could think, okay, you know, if the miner just had to implement their inclusion rule and they couldn't actually see the pool, then a lot of these malicious behaviors, you know, you wouldn't be able to do them. So what's the justification for the miner being able to see the transaction pool?
Miner can see the transaction pool. What do you mean?
I guess it just seems like a lot of these bad behaviors could be avoided if the miner couldn't actually see the transaction pool. If the miner just had to specify the rule and somebody else, yeah, maybe this question just doesn't make sense in the setting. I just don't quite understand why that.
Oh, you mean for example, the malicious miner can pretending that the transaction pool is the other things. So I deviated like that.
I guess why does the miner have to see the transaction pool? Like, why can't the rule just be implemented like by some third party or something?
Oh, okay. I guess in the blockchain setting is that the user just announced their bids on the P2P network. So in our model, we will assume that the bids are public. So the miner can just so all the bids are public, so the miner can see the.
The decentralized system without the specifier. So that's why the miners they're trying to keep a public ledger. And so in order to keep the public ledger, they need to decide would be something like 100%.
Question? Okay, so the second rule is called confirmation rule. So the confirmation rule tells it is that, okay, so given the block, the confirmation rule will tell you which ones are confirmed, which ones are not. And this confirmation rule is implemented by the blockchain protocol. So it cannot be, it's out of control of the miner. So take the second price auction as an example. So the top K-1 are confirmed. In this case, the 9 and 8 are confirmed. And the lowest one is unconfirmed. So in this case, 7 is unconfirmed. So the confirmation rule is that you give me the block, and I can tell you which one are confirmed and which one are not. This is confirmation rule. And the interesting remark is that in general, inclusion is not equal to confirmation. So for example, all 9, 8, 7, they are all included in the block, but 7 is not confirmed. But to include this 7 is actually necessary because in the second price auction, this 7 is used to set the payment, set the price. Okay, so this is confirmation rule. And the third rule is payment rule. It specifies how does each confirmed user pay. So in the second price auctions, all the confirmed users just need to pay the lowest price in the block. So in this case, these two users pay $7 each. And here we make assumptions or the constraint on the payment rule is that if you are unconfirmed, you pay nothing. If you are confirmed, then your payment never exceeds your bid. Okay, and the final rule is called miner revenue rule. So it specifies what does the miner get. So the only assumption about the miner revenue is that it cannot exceed the sum of the total payment. So that means the miner can just get part of the payment and the other part can be burnt. So by burning, we just means that those money just be eliminated from the circulation. Yeah, so in summary, if we use the second price auction as an example, these 4 rules looks like this. And here I can also give a quick remark is that what is the difference between the design for blockchain and the design for like the traditional auction? So in the traditional auctions, they usually only have allocation rule and the payment rule. So the allocation rule in the auction just is something that, okay, you give me those bids. I tell you which one are the winner, who buy the items. But here, because we actually have 2 levels. So in the blockchain, allocation is implemented by the inclusion and both confirmation. So what do I mean? Is that on blockchain, miner is not trusted. So inclusion rule is implemented by the miner, and the miner can be malicious. It can deviate from the inclusion rule. However, confirmation rule is implemented by the blockchain protocol. It's something open, something just implemented by the protocol. So once the block is issued onto the chain, the miner cannot control what the protocol runs. So the confirmation rule is always implemented honestly. So we need to like differentiate inclusion rule and confirmation rule in the blockchain setting. And that is the new challenge in the blockchain design. And there is a new component is the miner revenue rule, because in the auctions, what the auctioneer earns is all the payments. In the auction, we do not eliminate the money, but on the blockchain, it's possible. So we have the in addition to the payment rule, we also need to specify what does the miner get. So these are the new design components in the blockchain case. Question? Okay, so before I tell you the impossibility proof, this is the final step. So we are going to analyze what is the rational behavior of the user. So we need to define the utility. Okay, so user utility is that if I'm a user, if my transaction is confirmed, then I can earn some values for me. However, I need to pay for the miner. So if my transaction is confirmed, my utility is the difference between my value and the payment. But if my transaction is not confirmed, then my value is just 0. So if I'm a user, I want to try my best to make my transaction confirm, and meanwhile, try to pay as less as possible. And minus utility is just the revenue. Okay, so that is the formal model of fee mechanism. And so we are ready to see our impossibility result. Okay, so let me go through the result again. If the block size is finite, no non-trivial mechanism can satisfy UIC and 1NCP at the same time. So actually, what we proved is that you cannot even have UIC and 1NCP. These two properties you cannot have this simultaneously. Okay, so let's see how we prove it. So before proving the theorem, let me introduce an intermediate result that if you want UIC and 1SCP, actually the miner always get nothing. This theorem holds for infinite block size or finite block size. So the idea is that, okay, suppose there is this transaction pool B1 to Bn, which give you the positive miner revenue. And we can show that if some user Bi lower its bidding to 0, miner's revenue should not change. So once you have the second step, then that's interesting. We can move everything down to 0 one by one. So at the end, you will reach another world that each user just bid 0. But if each user bids 0, where does the miner revenue come from? And we reach a contradiction. So the main challenge of this lemma is, how do you prove the second step? Okay, so in the following, I'm going to focus on the second step. If I move anyone down to 0, miner's revenue should not change. Okay, so the key component is called Meyerman lemma, which is proven by the Nobel winner, Roger Meyerman. So Meyerman's lemma says that if you want your mechanism to be UIC, that is, the user always bid truthfully, then your mechanism must satisfy two conditions. The first condition is called monotone. That means if I'm the confirmed user, I'm already confirmed. If I increase my bid, I'm still confirmed. If I'm unconfirmed user, I'm unconfirmed. If I lower my bids, I'm still unconfirmed. This is monotone. The second condition is that the payment rule must satisfy this constraint. So this constraint says that, okay, so given the environment, so just fix what other people do, how do you decide my payment? My payment is the minimum price that I can get confirmed. So if I bid $5, I can get confirmed. If I bid anything less than $5, say 5 minus epsilon, I'm not confirmed. Then my payment is just 5. Yeah, let's take the second price auction as an example. So if I'm the user bidding 8, I'm confirmed. If I bid anything higher than 8, I should also confirm, right? Because if I bid anything higher than 8, I must still in the top k minus 1. If I'm the 7, I'm unconfirmed. If I bid anything lower than 7, I'm still unconfirmed because I'm the last one, I'm still the best one. And let's see the unique payment rule. So suppose you are the 7. Let's fix the environment. Fix, I mean, okay, the other two guys just pay 9 and 8. What is the minimum price that you can get confirmed? I'm the 7. So my goal is that, okay, I try to become the top 2 person, right? How could I become the top 2 person? I need to bid higher than 8. So if I bid something higher than 8, like I bid 8.1, I become the top 2. So in this case, what is my payment? My payment is 8, because if I bid anything higher than 8, I'm confirmed. So if I just higher than 8, I'm confirmed. So that threshold should be my payment. So this is Meyerson's lemma tells you. If you want your mechanism to be UIC, it must be like this. And with Meyerson lemma, we can apply the following argument. So let's just fix the other bits. Yes.
On the previous slide, so you said that I don't have to pay 8 for it to be UIC. Like I thought it was the minimum price of the I thought it was lower 8 until it was 7, and then they pay 7 for the second option, not increase 7 until it's 8, and it's 8.
Okay. So I guess it's just two different perspectives. So what I said is that if I'm the 7 user, so you can start from that. You are the 8 user.
So then you're saying 7 user would pay 8, but then that's not fair.
What an investment person get 8 is that if I'm this guy, how can I become confirmed given the environment is 9 and 8?
Yeah. So then what's the payment rule? Like how much is everyone paying?
So the payment rule in the second price is just the lowest bid in the block. So if this guy bid like 8.1, then in this case, everything in the block is 9, 8, 8.1. So the payment is just 8 because that is the lowest price.
Okay, I think that was it's like I thought it was you confirm K people, and then or you include K people.
Right.
K minus 1 confirmed.
Right. Right.
My understanding is 9 and 8 pay 7. Right.
Right. In this case, right.
Okay, but isn't that all?
I think the thing that I would say is simply that if the 7 wants to be confirmed,
Yeah.
then 7 has to bid more than 8. Okay. In which case they will pay 8. Yeah, I think that's all.
Does that resolve your confusion? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But I would get about 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay, so let me quickly go through the proof. Okay, so the proof idea is that, okay, I fix the environment. I fix B2 to Bn, and I try to lower the first user one's payment from B1 to 0. And let's see what happened. And I claim that minor revenue should not change. So for convenience, I just call the first user Alice. So there are 2 cases. The first case is that what if Alice is unconfirmed if she bids B1? Then in this case, because it is unconfirmed, by Meyerman lemma, we know that if Alice bids 0, it is also unconfirmed. Because it is, in both cases, Alice are unconfirmed, so Alice utility is always 0. So in this case, if minor revenue change, let's say if minus revenue is larger if Alice bid B1, then you can imagine the world that, okay, Alice's true value is 0. Alice's true value is 0. The miner want to collude with Alice and ask Alice to bid B1. And because from the Alice view, it doesn't matter if it is 0 or B1, it is unconfirmed anyway. But the miner's revenue increase. So in this case, it is not 1 at CP.
We made the assumption that the miner's revenue is a quantum function.
No.
Since discarding is possible.
Yeah, we don't have that constraint. The miner revenue can increase, decrease in any case. So here I just say that if the miner revenue change, yeah, it is not 1 at CP. But in general, we don't have any constraint on miner revenue.
Maybe are you asking why you didn't prove that minor revenue is not like smaller?
Okay.
Yeah. So the other direction is similar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this fact that no matter Alice bid B1 or 0, its utility doesn't change is the key observation. So in this case, the coalition can just choose the better side. Okay. So the next case is a little bit more complicated. So what happens if Alice is confirmed if she bids B1? Then in this case, we need we divide it into 3 steps. So we first, by Meyerman lemma, we know that if Alice is confirmed, its bid must higher than its payment. So P is Alice's payment. So to lower B1 down to 0, we first lower B1 to P, the payment. And then we lower it from P to P minus epsilon. Epsilon just some arbitrarily small number. And finally, we reduce it down to 0. We divide it into 3 steps. So the first step, because if Alice bid P, it should still be confirmed. That because by Meyerman lemma, that is the minimum price I can get confirmed. So if I bid P, I'm still confirmed. So in this case, let's focus on what happens if we move it down B1 to P. So if Meyer's utility is larger in the B1 case, you can imagine that, okay, Alice's true value is P. Alice's utility is always 0, no matter if it's B1 or if it's P. Because my payment just P. and my true value is also P. So if I bid, no matter what was the bidding, Alice utility is always 0. So if miner's utility changes, the coalition can just choose the better side. So the other direction is just asymmetric. Okay. And actually from P minus epsilon down to 0 is also by the similar argument, because in P minus epsilon, that is, Alice's bid is lower than its payment, it should be unconfirmed. So this is just from unconfirmed to unconfirmed, and we can play the same argument. So the most difficult part is the transition from confirmed to unconfirmed. And let's discuss what happened in this case. So we claim that miner's revenue should not change. So for the contradiction, let's suppose miner's revenue suddenly increases by delta. Delta is some number. Then we can imagine that if Alice's true value is P, then it just, here is a typo. This 0 is should be P minus epsilon. This is P minus epsilon. So in this case, the Alice can just be P minus epsilon. And the miner's revenue suddenly increased by delta. And because Alice's true value is P, if it is confirmed, I just pay anything my true value, so my utility is 0. But if I bid P minus epsilon, and my transaction is unconfirmed, so I'm still 0. So Alice doesn't care it bid what the bid is, but the miner gains. So the coalition also gains, and it violates 1 SCP. The final case is a little bit more subtle, but the idea are the same. If miner revenue suddenly decreased by delta, we can conceive Alice's true value is P minus epsilon. And Alice can just bid P. So in this case, indeed, Alice overbids is more than its true value. So Alice actually get negative utility. But here, epsilon can be arbitrarily small. So we just tune epsilon to smaller than delta. The coalition also gains. So it violates 1 SCP. So combining all the argument above, we have shown that if Alice bids 0 instead of B1, minus revenue should not change. So we just move everything down to 0 and reach a contradiction. So actually, this lemma is interesting on its own, because I briefly claimed that in Ethereum's EIP 1559, miner actually gets nothing in the infinite block size case. And why is that case? Because if you want UIC and 1 SCP, miner gets nothing is necessary. So this is actually interesting because burning is something new in the blockchain design. And by this lemma, we show that this new element is actually necessary if you want the user to be non-zero. If you want the payment to be non-zero, then burning is necessary. Okay, we are almost reached the theorem. So our theorem says that, okay, not only UIC and 1 SCP, if you also want finite block size, then it's impossible to confirm anyone. The only mechanism is to reject anyone. So the idea is like this. Just imagine that the transaction pool looks like this. And there is some a lucky user who is confirmed. And we will show that it leads to a contradiction. So let me just label it as 7. Suppose there are some user bit 7 is confirmed. Yeah. The actual number is actually not important. So for example, I just say, okay, this 7 guy is confirmed. Then try to imagine that what happened if the real world looks like this. There's a lot of people whose true value is 7 plus epsilon. T is 7 plus epsilon. There's a lot of people whose true value like this. By a lot, I mean it's more than the block size. So I want to create the congestion. Because the block size is finite, I cannot fulfill all these T guys. So in that case, the miner, because we have shown that the miner's revenue is always 0. So I'm the miner, I doesn't care about who is confirmed, who is included, because my revenue is always 0. The miner can try to collude with the user whose true value is T. And the miner pretends that the real transaction pool looks like this, where this lucky 7 actually comes from the user with the true value 7 plus epsilon. So you can see that because the payment never exceeds that payment. So 7 is confirmed, its payment is smaller than 7. This user has some positive utility. So wow, the coalition gains. So just try to put it formally into the text is that if we start from some transaction pool where someone is confirmed, then we can imagine another transaction pool where there is a lot of more user with the true value like this. So there must be a user, let's call it Bob. It cannot be included because the block size is finite, it is congestion. And the miner can collude with Bob and just ask Bob to bid BJ. So in the honest case, because Bob cannot get inked, so the Bob utility is 0. But in the malicious case, Bob get in. And Bob's utility, because the payments cannot exist BJ, so Bob's utility is always positive. So in this case, coalition gains. Okay, so finally, let me quickly give you a hope that, okay, we tell the set story, we cannot achieve all 3 properties. But let me introduce a relaxed notion. In this case, we can have a mechanism. So in the previous impossibility proof, we assume that there is no cost for the overbidding. So again, this is second price option. Now miner can collude with the final user, not to bid 3, please bid 5. But in this case, this 5 is still unconfirmed. However, in the blockchain, we not just play the option once. There's always a next block after this block. So it is possible that, okay, this is unconfirmed, but it somehow become confirmed in the future, and I need to pay $5. So if I'm this user, I overbid, and I need to pay $5 in the future. So the net effect to me is I lose $2 because my value is just 3. So if we consider this extra cost, then we can try to model it like this. So indeed, it is really difficult to say that what is the extra cost of overbidding. Maybe the adversary can learn from the history. Maybe I only need to pay the 50% of the overbidding, maybe 30%, or maybe 70%. But let's just make this most pessimistic assumption. That is, the coalition only want to deviate from the protocol if they have no chance to lose. What I mean by no chance to lose? The coalition always consider the cost to be the full difference for the overbidding. So if I'm the user, I overbid, then extra cost is the bid minus true value. Because minus true value is 0, so the cost just is bid. So let's consider this most pessimistic adversary. And this is the difficult case for the adversary. So it is the easiest case for us to design a mechanism. So let's see, under this assumption, what kinds of mechanism we can have. Oh, so this is just reiterate what is the actual cost. So if I'm user, I'm unconfirmed, then I need to pay the full cost. In this case, we can have this mechanism. We call it burning second price auction, which is satisfy all three properties. So this mechanism works as follows. Again, K is the block size. T is the number of confirmed users. The highest T bids are confirmed, and all of them just pays the T plus 1 price. So in this example, the top 3 unconfirmed and 988 are confirmed, and all of them just paid 5. And the minor just get the sum of 5, 4, 3, which is 12. The unconfirmed user pays nothing. And we show that it satisfies all three properties. T is anything smaller than K. This is the parameter you can choose.
Like when T equals K minus 1. So even like the standard second price auction is fine, as long as
When T, right. In under the pessimistic assumption. Yeah.
over under the standard second price auction, the minor would only get 1 copy of the bid rather than take on the bid.
Correct. So T is something you can adjust. If you choose large T, then it's more one gets confirmed, but the minor is unhappy. Okay, so finally, let me just quickly go through what happened, what was more in our paper. So I claim that is the most pessimistic assumption, but actually we can consider the general case. So we consider the discount ratio called gamma. That is, what is the portion of the extra cost? So if gamma equals to 0, that means there's no extra cost for overbidding. If gamma equals to 1, then that means the coalition needs to pay the full cost. And the burning second price we have seen, it only resists 1 SCP. But we also consider the case where C larger than 1. But that leads to the second interesting part. If you want to resist larger coalition, by large, I mean anything larger than 1, start at 2 or 3 or 4, randomness is necessary. So we give a randomized mechanism to satisfy it. And finally, we have seen that in the burning second price auction, there's always some unconfirmed user. And you may think, oh, this is bad in the blockchain because that wastes some block space. But we also show that if you want to achieve SCP, containing unconfirmed user is also necessary. Okay, so here is my talk, and thank you very much.
I had a more philosophical question about this unconfirmed transaction. So I'm looking at the blockchain, right? The unconfirmed transaction is there. In what sense is it unconfirmed? Like I can see the transaction.
Right, you can see on the blockchain.
Therefore, I believe that it's happening because I can see it.
Yeah, it,
So that everybody agrees that this transaction never happened. Yeah.
yeah.
I have this question: why can't we introduce uncertainty to scare away users? In a sense, so if you consider this mechanism, you toss a coin and then implement a first price option or a second price option, then it will guarantee that 50% of the time everyone is, in fact, it's MIC all the time, and 50% of the time it's UIC 50%. Can you do this so that you can raise these bars to very close to 100, and you can add these failure probabilities, and you can say 99% of the time all of them.
Yeah, that is a
Sir,
very interesting question.
To add to that, can we introduce like a sequentiality of sorts? Let's say after each round of the inclusive rule, can we reveal? I think it comes back to, right back to this point. I think it's not clear to me what the mechanism is trying to do. Are we trying to reveal true value? Are we trying to maximize social welfare in some sense? If you want to reveal true value, what if we introduce like a randomization of the inclusion rule and then a sequentiality to like the inclusion blocks, right? Like so essentially after each round of inclusion, you keep revealing it to the point that people eventually reveal or stabilize at their true values. And would we get UIC definitely was there. I think the MIC would come from the randomization, right? So,
MIC is there in both of the.
would it be, I mean, obviously, would that still qualify as a mechanism to study this framework, or that completely different than? I don't work in the I'm just curious about the possibility.
And so I don't have a short answer, but I'm thinking about like, yeah, in that case, so if you use randomness, then the utility need to be like expected utility. So I'm not sure if we mix like a different mechanism, like second price or first price. What is miner and users expected utility looks like? My intuition is it is either not UIC and it is not UIC and not MIC in that case.
So the point is that instead of saying someone is honest or not honest, try to complete the gap by saying he's honest 50% of the time, not honest. He may not be honest. You quantify this and then try to push all the bars. I'm just asking if it's an interesting direction.
How do we account for, say, the history stories and the penalties for like lying and giving like false bids? But B also, I'm thinking of the real world situation right now. Say you're an early mover in the crypto days. You already have a value utility function in your head where you could imagine this one going crazy with the value. So it made sense for you to take loans in some sense. How do we introduce these elements where we have highly variable liquidity functions, which is essentially another way of talking about asymmetric information? And how do we allow for, say, money from outside the system coming in to allow one to like maximize value in the moment and then discount over time. So like, sequentially, not just in the bids, but sequentially over time, so we can take histories and we can track like value generation over time.
So I'm sorry. I'm not sure whether I understand your question correctly. So by sequentially, it means there's lots of block.
I mean, okay, in a given auction time period, let's say a time T, we have an auction, we can reveal true value of the asset being mined, right?
Reveal the true value of user and miner.
Reveal the true value, how the system values it in some sense. How, like, get people to reveal how much they're willing to give up for the asset, right? So be truthful to the extent. You can be truthful, you can make a bid strategically without necessarily revealing your value, right? Under second price, you could technically, like, if you had some informational advantage, you could easily do that. Or even under this situation, you don't need to necessarily bid out of your bank account.
You mean you are a user, you don't need to.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So I'm saying, what if I care for a system where I want to reveal value, where I want to get a true understanding of exactly what the value I have is, and then can I reduce the sequential quality A, and B, can I use histories and different utility functions which account for different expectations of where this asset may go to improve our understanding of this? Is that even possible under this framework?
I guess in general, the point is like there are lots of open problems in this space because this is a new mechanism design problem and other classical mechanisms fail. So I think a lot of ideas like this potentially would be interesting to explore.
Has this been worked on previously? I'm just curious because
This is a real
okay,
space. So I guess that it's probably not a short question.
right, maybe wrong time.
You can start this. I think the point is like there's tons of open problems you can ask. You know, other questions you have to ask for classical mechanism.
Right. So what are we going to optimize for? Okay, this is the last bunch of time. What is the objective function? Exactly what is the goal over here? The three criteria you mentioned, or this is what is the system's goal? Sometimes I've seen Botanic writing about this stuff. He talks about I want to have mechanisms where stability is a goal, evolutionary stability and whatnot. How do we start controlling for those kind of goals with these criteria in mind? I mean, that's just making the problem harder, but can we start introducing those kind of elements into this? That's what I'm kind of trying to understand. Because when I say true value revelation, it's a second way, another way of talking about UIC, right? And we're talking about the user base and to be honest about that thing. But over time, we also want a system where it doesn't break apart, even if we're like revealing too much information over how do we like start codifying these things into like new conditions? Wouldn't that require like some explicit mention of what our systemic goals are, beyond just having a mechanism satisfy some criteria? Or is that more market design question than an option design question?
Yes,
I guess very little understood.
Okay.
And that's why I think that we are hoping to kind of lay some of the groundwork that future work in this space, but that understanding maybe the longer term, longer scale dynamics and all of these are open questions, and I think the short answer is no.
Okay. So what would this start about outside the
I mean, there's like a lot of discussions online, but the information is quite noisy, like on the cryptocurrency forums. There are two places to start. To start with the forum, the online, the cryptocurrency discussions. We start with like classical mechanism design literature and see what tools people have used in the past and try to use it.
to be clear, I appreciate the talk, everyone. I'm not trying to question or undermine it. I'm just curious about these questions.
Yeah.
As someone who previously worked in social sciences, now I know math, so I was like told if I want to check out this dog, because it seemed like it might interest you.
They're very good questions. I guess unfortunately, the short answer is no one knows.
Yeah. I guess as Ian said, we can try to consider any property in the classical mechanism design and to see whether we can achieve it. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting new space. Think about